we're going to continue with a topic that we spoke about before, which is the two major functions of the intellect. So for those of you who were not here for the Shur, we talked about that the intellect does two things. One is to give us a report of reality. We call that recognition, cognizance, right? Cognition. Then there is another action of the intellect, which is called evaluation. And we said that one of these actions is theoretically supposed to be objective, and the second is by nature subjective. The objective part is the part that we are trying to figure out what reality is. Cognition, the Hebrew term is hakara, whereas the evaluation, ha'aracha, is something that is subjective. How you value something depends on your personality, or so we thought. But the Alei Shur says really the source of the evaluations of how we value things in life is really coming from our nefesh. It's really tied to the nefesh. And we ended with a teaching of Rabbeinu Yonah. The Rabbeinu Yonah said that if a person values tzaddikim, righteous people, good morals, gemilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, mitzvahs, rabbis, naturally that is what he will become. How do you find out what is the essence of a person? The Alei Shur says, "Etzem mahuto shel ha'adam mitgala bema shehu ma'arich." The essence, your essence, is going to be discovered when we look at what you value. What you think is important tells us who you really are. What you value tells us who you really are. So if you want to look for a good marriage partner, those are the type of questions that you should ask. What do you value? What do you find important? What do you want in life? Now, when God created the world, it's a medrash, the angels said to him, "Why are you creating these beings? What are they going to do? Why are you paying so much attention to human beings?" And the medrash says that the Kadosh Baruch Hu said to them, "Is there among you erech nefashos, the value of the nefesh?" And then he quotes a pasuk that is Parashat Bechukotai. We talked about this pasuk yesterday. But in a sense, he says to them that this world is about values. Olam hazeh is about values. Whatever you choose in your life is about what you value. And there's an example that he gives. There's a very good example. I thought it was a very, very good example. The intellect can look at a piece of paper that we term that piece of paper, Harry, stamp, and says, this is worthless. It's worthless. Usually it's used already, right? It's got the stamp of the post office. But on the other hand, there's a person who values these used stamps, and he collects these stamps, and to him they're worth what? A lot of money. Some stamps, the older they are, they're very rare, as they say, are worth millions. But in reality, from an intellectual perspective, it means nothing. But there is an aspect of value that is put into this little piece of paper, this tiny little piece of paper, that says this is worth a lot of money. Where is this value coming from? from people. So sometimes you see the connection between what the intellect says with regard to reality and what the intellect does with regard to value don't agree. And that really this world is all about values. In Western society, we value people who could take a ball and go from one side of the court to the other and put it in a basket. And we pay them a lot of money. There are other people who can take a little stick and hit a ball certain distance, and we'll throw more money at them. And if there's 11 guys who can put helmets, right, and shoulder pads, and go beat up 11 other guys, they're not beating them up. I know, I've seen football. But the idea is that those are the values that we say, this is important, this is what, and we see the value. If there's a guy who can sing, right, we say, let's throw as much money as we can on the guy. But he only has one glove. Who cares? Even more money. Right? But that is a matter of values. It's a matter of value. Of what do we value? And it tells a lot about who we are. And part of learning Musar is figuring out, first of all, A, what do I value? And what does it say about me? And do I recognize that what I value, is this the truth? And if it's not, then what are you doing about it? This is what we're involved doing. Okay. So, we could see that the way that we value something can create almost something out of nothing. Take a used piece of paper called stamp and put so much value in it that people are willing to pay a lot of money for this little. Look at diamonds. Apparently diamonds are not that rare. They're not. There's some sort of a warehouse full of diamonds that they're just releasing in small amount to create this sort of idea that, and that if you get engaged, you have to give a diamond. Now, I'm not telling you not to or to, but it's the way that we take a piece of carbon, right? And we say this is valuable and that this is worth a lot of money. And to every girl, you want this on your hand. Because if he really loves you, then, he should get you this piece of carbon. Now, you can buy a piece of coal. It's made out of carbon and say, if you put it on your finger, could turn into a diamond with enough pressure. But that's not going to work. We put values into things for different reasons. Marketing is all about values. Just ask Mordechai. It's trying to get people to believe, to have value something that doesn't have the value that it should have, or that it has more value than it should have. This world is about values. It's not a world about truth and falsehood. There is reality. We have the ability to decide what is true and what is false. But when it comes to putting value, everything gets jarbled up. But we have to be aware of this. We have to be very open to the process of evaluation of where we're putting value into things. Okay? There. For us, there's a statement that we say in Shachris, on Shabbos. En ke'erkecha Hashem Elokeinu ba'olam hazeh. There's nothing more valuable than you, God, in this world. That is what we want every Jew to recognize. That is that you value the Kadosh Baruch Hu more than anything, and that you recognize the veracity or the truth of this statement, and you live by it. That is the purpose of Judaism. To value. This is what we say on Shabbos. We pray to Hashem and we say, there is nothing more valuable than you, God, in this world. Ba'olam hazeh. If we say, which we did, that the ikar, the main part of our free will, is to reach the value that is true, absolutely true, then where do we go from here? So we said before that the seichel, the intellect, has to be pure and has to work right. That is straight. Can't work crooked. And then, if your intellect works like it's supposed to, you will come up with true reality. What reality is, truthfully. Not just perception. Sometimes you perceive something, you think it's true, but, you realize that it's not. Ever had that to you? Happen to you? For example, you thought it was a friend, and hey, and then you realize that's not, and you put your hand in your pocket, and I keep walking. I was talking to the other guy. Because we perceive a certain thing, and it turns out to be that it's false. But that could happen in very serious things. Very serious things that have implications about life and death. So, how did the rabbis define this type of intellect? So I'm going to share with you what the Rambam wrote in the Guide of the Perplexed. If you want to look it up, it's book 3, chapter 51. He says like this: this intellect that was bestowed upon us by God is the connection between us and Him. So the way we connect to God is through our intellect. It is not through our tummy. It is not through our eyes, our ears, or other bodily faculty. It is through the intellect. It's very important. And the reshus, the ability, is given to you if you want to strengthen that connection, and you have the ability to weaken that connection up to the level that is disconnected completely. It's up to you. You have the ability to connect to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. You have the intellect to connect to Him. And you can occupy yourself with ways of connecting to the Kadosh Baruch Hu more and more and more, thereby strengthening that connection. Or you can weaken that connection. You could do it slowly. That's what the Rambam says. Or I would add, you could probably do it more quicker. You could do it quickly if you wanted. It's up to you. But the question is, what do you want? Are you going to use the intellect for the right reason or for the wrong reason? So the Rambam gives us a very, very clear understanding of what the intellect could do if you use it right. If you use your intellect correctly, it can connect you to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's what its purpose. It was designed this way. But you could also disconnect, you could change its use and use it for other things. I don't want to give you ideas, so I'm not suggesting anything, but I think you can figure out what you can use your intellect for. Like inventing bitcoins or forex trading, which now is going to be illegal in Israel. Chavaz Levava says that the way the intellect works is to connect God with the human being. That is the intent of God. That the intellect is the tool that we can use to connect to God. And it creates this intellect, which is, if connected to God, creates the desire to want to connect to God even more. Okay? So it sort of builds, and once you have the connection, then it wants you to have a better connection, and a better connection, and a better connection, and a better connection. because you want that connection. So the Seichel, says the Alei Shur, is the makom for Siyata Dishmaya in the human being. This is the way that you get Siyata Dishmaya. It's through your intellect. Siyata Dishmaya is help from Shamayim. That you get an idea in your head that you should do something like this, and it works, and you're like, wow, that's Siyata Dishmaya, Hashem helped you.
Like a little bit of Rosh.
Well, that's a little too far.
Like small.
You're getting help. But it's through the things that coming into your mind. Siyata Dishmaya.
And that's through the connection.
It is what wakes us up. Listen to what he says. Wakes us up to do a good deed. It warns us that we don't do bad deeds. And it is also has the consciousness, the conscience that attacks us if we did something that we shouldn't have done. All those three. And it comes from the intellect. And we see that even with regard to making money, making a living, the pasuk says, and you shall remember the Lord your God, that He gives you strength to succeed. Koach la'asot chayil. So if you look at the Targum, it says there that God gives you eitzah, gives you ideas to make money, to succeed in business. Mordechai, you hear this? That's the Siyata Dishmaya. And the dveikis, the place where we connect to God, is the pure intellect. But you have to make sure that it's pure. So now let's talk about the different parts of the intellect. We know there's Chokhmah, there's Bina, and there's Dat. Okay? Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat. 3 terms. What do they mean? We're going to talk about that. Okay? So let's talk about Bina first. Bina, how would you translate Bina? Anybody? Application, knowledge, understanding. So the reason I didn't define it is because I'm going to give you a definition, and then we'll come up with a word that actually works for it. Bina is the ability to understand one thing from something else. Bina is understanding one thing from something else. Differentiation? No, differentiation is not. It's more probably inductive knowledge, deductive knowledge. So listen, you understand something from something else. Understanding one thing is not called Bina. But understanding this thing from the first thing that you understood, I'll give examples. That is called Bina. Because now you have something new, Max. You have something new that you didn't have before. And that is Bina. Bina is when you are building new buildings, new ideas. Correct. You say one thing and you go, okay, if that's true, then this is going to be true. How'd you get that? Because it's like this. And how do you get that? Because it's like that. And you're learning one thing from another. You knew this, now you're learning from, if it's like this, then this means that. Which is you're creating something new. That is called Bina. It says in the Torah, Vayomer Elokim Naaseh Adam B'Tzalmeinu K'Dmuteinu. We shall create God, and God said, we shall create man, or Adam, in our image and our likeness. If you look in this pasuk, what does Rashi say? Lehavin, Bina, lehavin, to understand, ulehaskir, seichel. And what does that mean? That once we are able to look at what our senses present to us, which is all sorts of information, our senses present us with all sorts of information, right? We call that chomer, matter. We then abstract, strip the matter in order to come up with a principle. So if I show you a lot of different books or chairs or dogs, eventually you'll come up with an idea of what a dog is, or what a chair is, what a book is. Even though they're different shapes, different sizes, have different. But we have the ability to take sensory data, the things that we see in our world, and abstract from it, take from it an idea. Okay? And then we become wiser. Because we learn something from something. But if a person has an intellect that is not pure, that is not thinking straight, you will not be able to do this accurately. You'll come up with things that are crooked. You'll come up with things that are problematic. Because then you're not getting a true picture of reality. You're getting a warped picture of reality, and the whole system becomes skewed. Now, but if you read Rashi, Rashi says this, Kidmutenu. So Rashi brings a medrash that says that with this God implanted in us the ability to be like God. He gave us an intellect to learn one thing from another, and that ability is supposed to lead us to what? To imitate God. Recognizing true reality should create in us the desire to imitate God. That's the idea. And what is that imitating God? He's merciful, you'll be merciful. You take care of the poor. That is, it's supposed to make us similar to God in our moral virtues. You see, there's a direct connection between understanding universal truths, understanding what reality is, and our moral behavior. That's how it's supposed to work if you're not crooked.